Hello everyone, for my second sub-incentive video, I will be doing a mini guide for both Picto and Viper in Final Fantasy XIV PvP. This will be primarily focused on Crystalline Conflict and winning more games there with these two classes. So without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting with Pictomancer. Let's start by discussing the main strengths and weaknesses of Pictomancer. The first thing is Comet is a good damage move, as well as has a delay that is useful for reverse snapshotting buffs, and it's good for doing damage at the end of someone's guard. They have good mobility with Smudge, while gaining a move speed buff from it and an instant cast motif. Their LB now gives an AoE damage buff, as well as the flat heal it has. They have good bursts with Motif and Comet combined. They have decent AoE CCs with motifs when painted and help with burst. And now let's go over the negatives. While it has good burst, its damage over a game isn't as high as some other classes, and if the burst is not used effectively, you won't get much out of it, and you'll find yourself mainly needing to use your burst on targets that your team is targeting, so it does require a little bit of coordination to get the most out of Picto's kit. Let's start by going over each of the skills and how to implement them into your game plan to win more games. Picto's basic combo comes in two parts. The 3 instant cast GCDs with the normal part, and the 3 hard casted GCDs with a short cast time when you're in subtractive stance. You'll want to prioritize using the hard casted GCDs as much as possible whenever it's safe to do so, since they do more damage over time. But you shouldn't be afraid to use the non-subtractive GCD casts too. The damage difference isn't too significant, so if you stay safe because of having instant casts, the value of the normal GCDs is very useful. If you need to run away and don't need sprint, you should definitely be using the normal version of the basic GCD to kite your enemies. You can also use the normal GCD as a method of finishing people off if you know they have a very low amount of HP after you do other attacks, since it's an instant cast. Because the subtractive GCDs have a cast time, this also means you can prime players for damage as they are running out of their time on their guard. To time this properly, look at their buffs under their HP bar, and when their guard is at 1 second left, you can cast a subtractive cast to maximize your damage uptime and hit them harder for the second they get out of their guard. Pictomancer's next most important ability would have to be Holy in White / Comet. 90% of the time you'll want to use Comet in black as it does very high damage for a normal AoE GCD. You'll usually open fights with this and creature motifs to buff their damage further and burst people's HP down. On top of being an instant cast, Comet also has a delay for damage. While in a good chunk of situations this can be seen as a weakness, there's actually a few advantages we can get out of the delay on Comet's damage that can be fun to execute and in some cases devastating for the opponents. The first thing we can do is nuke people the second their guard finishes. Just like the subtractive cast tech I talked about, at 1 second left on someone's guard, you can also do a Comet when an opponent has 1 second left to do full damage of Comet once they're done guarding. This can set up for surprise damage and situations that could kill opponents, especially when you pair this with a creature and a Mog / Medine after someone's guard. They can usually be as good as dead if they are guarding in the first place. The last advantage with Comet's delay was actually introduced recently with 7.1's PvP system changes. To talk about it first, when PvP updated in 7.1, all skills started to work with a new snapshot system with buffs. I've personally called this new system reverse snapshotting because it works somewhat opposite from PvE's buff snapshots on damage. To explain this first, for example in PvE, in order to buff Comet's damage with a damage buff, you would need to first have a buff, then cast Comet. But in PvP, buffs apply at the moment of damage application, rather than what was applied as a move is casted. So, for example, in PvP, we can do as follows. We can do Comet into Palm Motif, and if we time it in such a way where Palm Motif is casted immediately after the Comet, The Comet will get the damage buff, which I will show on screen here, as the Comet's damage connects. Please note that this tech is not Picto specific, so you can utilize this for some other classes as well. This is strong in PvP with Comet because we can stack the damage of something like Palm or Claw tightly next to Comet's damage while still buffing it, leading to unsuspecting higher burst damage in a short succession. Other than this tech, Comet has 2 charges, so try not to let it overcap and use it as much as possible because its damage is very good for an AoE normal GC. As for Holy and White, you rarely use this in comparison to Comet, but its value is higher in the sense that its heal plus damage value is a higher total number than Comet's damage alone. Holy and White is good in situations where you need to stall, or your healing is buffed by other party members' buffs, or your own Palm/Advent of Choco Bastion buff. For creature motifs, you're typically encouraged to use them back to back if you have the time to paint, or paint with an instant paint using the Quick Sketch buff from Smudge. The reason is because Palm and Claw give damage buffs on your opponent to make your next motif do more damage, as well as Claw into Ma or Mog of the Ages, doing more damage as well. The other reason you may want to do this is if you have the Claw into Ma already, the Ma's dot damage will go up from the Vuln on the enemy. The other reason you want to do these things back to back is because the follow-ups with Medine and Mog of the Ages are hard CCs, which allow you to put your opponents in bad situations immediately after they take high amounts of burst damage, meaning their only response is to Purify, making it harder to live after doing all this damage to them. For Tempura Coat and Tempura Grossa, you often want to be spamming Tempura Grossa, which is the follow-up AoE shield, between weaves or before the start of a teamfight as often as possible. If you can manage to hit all your teammates, the value of shields you give is very high, being 8k shields on each ally, which is times 5 is 40k worth of shields to your team. This value goes up when you have a heal buff like Palm or Choco Bastion, meaning you can hold the Grossa for after those situations to activate them and give your team a very high amount of shields. Otherwise, if you're dying, please use Tempura Coat weaved with a recoup heal when you're running away. If you can also cancel your guard to mix up the timing in a tight situation, you may want to do so using the shield to trick your opponents and start running away immediately, out of a guard. You should probably only do this though if they're not mashing buttons on your guard. If they are, ending your guard early will probably end up making you take more damage and give their cooldowns more value. Smudge is Picto's other best friend. This tool makes you extremely hard to kill. Not only is it a low cooldown gap closer, but it also gives you a 25% move speed buff, and a buff called Quick Sketch which allows you to instantly cast your next motif. This Quick Sketch buff is a godsend as it allows you to have the move speed buff from Smudge while painting your motif instantly. This means you can do it while running away and not be penalized by not pressing sprint. That's not all, however. Quick Sketch is also very useful in team fights versus teams with high amounts of CC as well, because it allows you to instantly cast a motif before getting CC'd / ensure you don't waste a GCD painting while getting CC'd, because nothing's worse than starting a paint and then getting CC'd to cancel it. On top of that, you should always use Smudge out of the entrance after dying and respawning, as it allows you to paint a motif with 0 downtime as you move back to the fight faster. One last important tech with Smudge is something I see underutilized. It is a trick I call corner warping. If you smudge into a wall angled towards a corner, your character will instantly teleport through the corner of the wall to the other side. This is extremely useful for juking opponents / running away, because you instantly break line of sight with your opponents, making you much harder to kill as it can cancel their casts or make them unable to target you with follow-up skills, and leaving them surprised why you effectively teleported. Fun bonus fact, if you're playing on a map with elevation, you can also use Smudge to teleport off a ledge without taking damage, making for another strong method for running away without taking fall damage. Finally, we have Pictomancer's Limit Break Choco Bastion. There's multiple ways you can use this move, but the most important thing to note when using it in any situation is its high LB generation time or cost, and its delay on startup before the Chocobo knocks players away. This awkward slow speed can kill you easily if you don't use it preemptively enough before getting low HP, making you whiff your LB entirely if you use it while dying. Once casted, you can use Star Prism to AoE heal everyone for a chunky burst heal in a teamfight, as well as giving everyone including yourself a damage buff. While everyone stays inside Choco Bastion, they receive a buff to their healing potency and a damage mitigation. This means Choco Bastion is really good for sudden death scenarios and contesting important objectives/pushes. Placing it in the right spot is important for success, so that your team is encouraged to stay inside it and utilize its damage mitigation/healing increase. It was also brought up before, but inside your Choco Bastion, your healing is increased, meaning you get high value off your shields and Holy and White if you need to survive higher incoming damage longer. Finally, as a fun fact, in some rare cases, if people aren't guarding or purifying, you can use Choco Bastion to knock enemies off the points for funny win situations I like to call Choco wins. Please use this at your own discretion though, as saving it for a team fight is 90% of the time a better use of this move. Now let's go ahead and move on to Viper. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Viper? Viper is one of the best, if not the best staller in PvP with snake scales and refreshing snake scales. They have great mobility with their sliver and limit break, while also gaining move speed buffs from them. They have amazing sustained damage if you keep uptime. Their LB is potentially the highest total damage LB in PvP if you can get off all the hits, especially in AoE. And they have one of the best ranged melee buttons in the entire game for PvP. I would say their one main weakness is their burst damage in a short period of time is not super high. You usually need to be attacking enemies for a good chunk of time to do devastating damage. Let's go over Viper's game plan. Viper's game plan is a little more straightforward at times with just keeping as much uptime as possible, but it has some finesse in it that it can take practice if you want to abuse Viper's strongest suits, such as stalling with their massive amount of healing move. Viper's basic combo doesn't have much to say. You'll not be using it too often, as most of the time you'll be able to press your Blood Coil or Uncoiled Fury in fight. But once those are on cooldown, you'll want to do your basic combo as well, especially since building towards Death Rattle also helps accelerate your LB charge. Uncoiled Fury is one of Viper's best tools, and is one of the strongest melee GCDs in PvP. It does a chunky 8k damage while doing 4k AoE, and has 2 follow-ups that each do 4k each, and are true damage through guard. All of Viper's follow-ups charge LB generation including these, meaning each time you use this move you do 2 OGCD follow-ups that both generate LB gauge. You'll want to always keep the cooldown of this move rolling and not let it overcap too much, because it's super good and it does a lot of damage. The fact that it's ranged also means you can use it in most situations, and you can sometimes save a charge if you know someone's going to run away at low HP. If you see an enemy guarding at low HP, don't hesitate to send this move and the OGCD follow-ups, as usually you can kill people at low HP and guard with this move and the Blood Coil follow-ups, since they do true damage through guard. Slither is an amazing gap closer move that teleports you to your target, and gives you a 25% move speed buff for 4 seconds. This move speed buff is extremely important as it can help you chase and keep uptime on your opponents, as well as in some cases help you run away out of diving situations. There's other tech for this move too that's incredibly important that we will go over once we talk about Snake Scales next. Which now, it's time for the star of Viper's kit, Snake Scales. Snake Scales is a move that makes or breaks Viper depending on how well you use it. This move makes Viper's stalling infamously strong when used correctly, and makes Viper extremely annoying to target and kill in some cases. To explain this move, once you enter Snake Scale stance, you take 50% reduced damage and can't be CC'd by normal CC moves. You also grant yourself a 4k shield, making you hard to kill when you enter Snake Scales. Once Snake Scales is pressed, you get an extremely important follow-up move called Backlash. Knowing how to use this move can easily make the difference between good and bad Viper gameplay. This move is an OGCD follow-up that is an AoE that receives a buff for nearby damage if your shield breaks in Snake Scales, meaning you pretty much only want to pop Snake Scales if you know, or it's very likely, you'll take enough damage and break that shield, which means you'll need to take around 8k worth of damage to have that shield pop once you've entered Snake Scales. This is not too hard of a condition to meet, so popping Snake Scales can be good in many situations and can be very doable if you know the enemy is about to attack you. Most importantly, however, is Backlash's properties. Backlash, the follow-up, on top of doing chunky damage, heals you for all the damage dealt by it, meaning that if you AoE with it, you usually heal for full HP. As you can imagine, this makes Viper very hard to kill when used correctly. But what if I told you we can take this move a step further? For this next part, I will discuss what I believe to be Viper's most important tech. I will call Snake Scale Warping. As you may imagine, the weakness of Snake Scales is enemies running away from it after they hit you, to take either reduced damage from Backlash or get out of its range completely and make you heal less too. However, what if I told you we can always guarantee the max proximity damage of a buffed Backlash even if your opponent runs away? To do this, we use PvP's reverse snapshotting system to make a combo that guarantees hitting someone with max Backlash damage if they try to run away. To do this, we pop Snake Scales, Backlash, and then we immediately mash Slither while targeting someone. This causes your character to warp the Backlash damage onto your opponent as long as they're in Slither range, because Slither range puts you right next to them. This guarantees they also take max proximity damage from the Backlash, which is 16k AoE damage and a 16k heal to you, and that's just if it hits one person. On top of this gets even more devastating when you realize Backlash is an OGCD. It means we can immediately follow up with a GCD such as Blood Coil or Uncoiled Fury for an instant surprise of 24k AoE damage. If we want to get even spicier, we can substitute the Slither for Viper's Limit Break instead, since it's also a targeted gap closer move, giving the same results with even more damage because of World Swallower's Noxious Gnash damage amp debuff, and a 12k hit from the activation of your Limit Break, leading to a surprise instant 30k AoE damage on an unsuspecting opponent. With your LB ready after this, if you have the time to hit them with it and they're somehow still alive, you can guess they're probably dead to follow-up damage from your LB. A last note on Snake Scales and Backlash is that you can instantly guard after Backlash to make yourself safe and not get CC'd post-Backlash. This is extremely helpful as an extra stalling method if you know the opponents are still hitting you and aiming you down, as you'll still heal inside the guard once the damage from Backlash applies. While brief, it's important to note Rattling Coil as an important skill in Viper's kit. It gives you one charge of Uncoiled Fury while resetting your Snake Scales cooldown. You'll often want to try to make sure to use Snake Scales before you use this move to get the maximum usage out of the skill, but if you need an extra Uncoiled Fury to kill someone, it is extremely worth to just send this move for the extra Uncoiled Fury. You'll often use this move to do double Snake Scales back to back for stalling, however. Finally, let's talk about Viper's Limit Break. Viper's Limit Break is mainly good for high AoE damage scenarios on a point or when one or more people are running away. It's great for chasing because you have a 25% move speed buff the entire time, while applying a 5-second minus 75% move speed buff on the opponents. The most devastating part about the LB can also be the fact that the legacy OGCDs go through guard for true damage, meaning even guarding players at low HP are still usually dead. In total, if Viper's LB is somehow not interrupted, it can deal around 50k worth of AoE damage, which can be devastating to the enemy team if not stopped. However, usually when Viper's LB, it puts a target on your back, because it takes around 7.5 seconds to execute all the hits of your Limit Break. You'll have to choose your LB spots carefully when you aren't the main target, or when people will definitely die to it, to ensure your LBs are not wasted because you can't do anything. Also, do not be afraid to do your LB and then snake scales after. While this sounds weird, your LB buff lasts for 20 seconds, meaning you can easily afford to do even 2 snake scales in it while still being able to easily complete all the hits. This can catch people off guard too, as they expect you to be swinging once you're in your LB. There's very likely more to talk about when talking about Picto and Viper, but I feel these strategies and tips will help you win more games with them, and have more fun at the same time too. Hopefully you learned some new things, and if you did find this video helpful, please like, comment, and or subscribe, or consider following me on my Twitch where I stream lots of Final Fantasy XIV content, roguelikes, and Souls-likes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have fun out there in PvP, especially with Viper and Picto.